Okay, well, welcome everybody to Quick to Politic. I'm your host, Ernestine Lyons, and we are being joined today by a very special guest, my lifelong friend of more than what? It's been 12, 13 years?
13 years, maybe. Yeah.
13 yeah. So one of my best friends, one of my all-time favorite people, and this is Nick Elsey. He is my friend, and he also has a PhD in physics. He's a very smart guy, and a while ago you had a podcast yourself talking about like machine learning, and this
Yeah.
was like 5, 6 years ago.
I guess probably 2017, 2018. I was
Hmm.
in the middle of my PhD and I was just trying to force myself to learn a bit more about machine learning. And so I decided I'll force myself to be on a schedule by
Right.
doing a podcast. And it worked for about 7 episodes. And then it turns out you're really busy when you're doing a PhD. And so it kind of got put
Yeah.
on the back burner.
I can imagine, and I remember you were doing that, and so it's just like, so Nick is a very smart guy, and he does very interesting things, and he's just a really fascinating person, and so our topic today is going to be artificial intelligence and all of the wonderful things that are happening in technology with regards to the new heights that machine learning has taken us to, and the latest thing that's all the rage these days. I do sound like a boomer. Nick just off camera called me a boomer. I am 4 years older than him, and so he just wants to call me a boomer every opportunity he gets. Um, so even though we both millennials, I know that Nick has enlightened me with a lot of, just artificial intelligence and machine learning, and a lot of it at the time was going over my head, and I would try because like I'm also a nerd and I always want to know more about these things, but right now we are dealing with a transformative time in history with ChatGPT. OpenAI has, this program and software. I don't even know if you want to call it one or the other, but ChatGPT is so it's a generative pre-trained transformer. That's what the GPT stands for in there. And it is this technology, and I'll probably just put in a link of, what it looks like once the video is edited for those of you who are listening. But it generates anything that you would want to ever know about anything. So you can say in there, chat GPT, write me an essay, about the reign of King Henry VIII, written in eighth grade style, so, or, I recently asked it to write a recipe for me for teenagers, and one of them is lactose intolerant. So, and it takes 30 minutes, and here are the ingredients that I have. So you give it prompts, and then it generates a response. So we're going to be talking more about that. So I just want to jump right into some questions for you, Dr. Els. Wait. Tell us about yourself first. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited about this topic that
Getting a little too
um
excited there.
yes, I am. Yes, I am. So this interview is going to be all over the place, especially because when you're talking to your friends, you can just be you. It's not like I'm like talking to a, oh no, you are a professional, but like you're a real person, but you're my friend, so I can be myself.
I guess I can be both things. Okay, so in terms of my background,
Mhm.
I said like Ernie said, I started off in physics. I did a
Mhm.
PhD in physics at Wayne State. That's where we met.
Whoop, whoop.
I finished my PhD in 2019, and I decided I didn't want to continue with doing a postdoc or go for a professorship after that. And so my some of my work prior to graduating had been in using machine learning. And I decided at that, even at that time, I mean, I think the hype for this sort of stuff has just continued to build over time. And at that time, it was pretty obvious to me that I would have pretty good job prospects turning some of that experience that I had into a career. And so I ended up joining Ford as a machine learning scientist, kind of, basically a data scientist who focuses on machine learning projects, essentially. Um, and so since I've joined Ford, I've had a bit of experience doing all sorts of different projects, things from working with Ford Credit to working with Ford Performance. So the team that does the analytics for the race car teams, I've worked with them. And my biggest projects are working with the product development group and building out technologies, machine learning based technologies for computer aided engineering, which is the tools that are used to design the vehicles before they go to production. So all of the computer programs like CAD, physical simulations, stress tests, wind tunnel simulations, that sort of stuff. We've been putting a lot of work into dealing with, either enhancing or speeding up those sorts of simulations using machine learning and deep learning specifically.
All right, all right. So that is very impressive. Ain't y'all impressed that this guy? I'm so glad you're my friend because you always help me. You break down the the big concepts in digestible bites. So thank you so much for illuminating us with like who you are, because you're the perfect person to be talking about this right now as we're going through this wave of everybody discovering this. I know like Lester Holt just did a whole special about it, and everybody is afraid that it's going to take our jobs. So you explain some of the basics of, AI and machine learning to our listeners, and, then how that has come to create, something as revolutionary as OpenAI. And OpenAI does not only ChatGPT, but there's also the DALL-E, which generates images. And so some of that like machine learning, those concepts are then put into like images that the machines are actually saying, create this, and here it is, here's a picture of a astronaut in space, sitting on a banana. So yeah, so if you could explain some of those concepts to our
Sure. Yeah. So starting from the very high level, there's this term AI, which I think is a bit loaded. There are technical definitions for it, but the majority of the use right now is hype and marketing and stuff like that. But it does correspond to very real technologies and technologies that are being used right now. So artificial intelligence is basically just the field of computer science that deals with giving computers the ability to make decisions or to process data in a way that would be more familiar as like something a human would do, right? So we're used to computers doing things like calculating spreadsheets, and we're used to humans doing things like identifying different birds when you go out on a walk, or making split-second decisions, controlling robots, picking up items, moving them around, that sort of stuff. And so artificial intelligence is kind of about bridging that gap between calculating spreadsheets and starting to be able to interact with other parts of the real world, or doing even just non-standard things that computers haven't been able to do before. And so there's lots of different ways that people try to make computers do things that fall under AI. The first and one of the original methods of trying to build AI systems was actually rules-based, where you'd have someone sit down and write a bunch of rules, like, if 5% or, if 50% of the pixels in this image are red, and, the object has exactly this sort of shape, then, predict it's a red apple or something like that. Turns out writing rules for complex situations does not work, right? You can't really write rules that say identify every single picture with a banana in it. It doesn't work. And so a lot of the hype over the last, I would say probably since 2012, when deep learning really started taking off in 2012. And that's when the hype around all machine learning started to really take off. But machine learning as a field is older than that. And the interesting thing about machine learning as a subset of AI is that it takes away the rule writing portion. Humans don't have to write the rules. Humans give a algorithm of some sort a bunch of data, and you give the algorithm a bunch of labels. So you give it a bunch of pictures of red apples, and you give it a bunch of pictures of bananas, and you give it a bunch of pictures of tangerines, and you tell the computer, here's an algorithm, here's a bunch of pictures and their labels. Now figure out how to, create the algorithm that will map these pictures to these labels. So you just iterate through a whole bunch of data, and through the magic of calculus, usually, the this algorithm will eventually learn like some sort of, you know rule set that allows it to decide, like, yes, in this picture there is an apple, or in this picture there is a banana. And so um, that differentiation, or the kind of the switch from humans writing rules to giving a bunch of data to a computer and letting the computer sort it out, that was kind of the thing that started to make machine learning take off real fast, because it turns out computers can do a whole lot of computation real fast. And that's the sort of thing that made it start to take off the way it did. And specifically, all of the models that you're very interested in, the ChatGPT, the GPT-2 and 3, DALL-E, these are all powered by what's called deep learning, and that's specifically neural networks. And those really took off in 2012 when they figured out kind of how to run these computations on specific computing devices called graphical processing units. And it turns out that those graphical processing units are much faster for that sort of thing. And so that's the thing that really kicked off this deep learning trend that over the last 10 years has basically taken us from, zero to where we are right now, where you have a GPT model that can, tell you, write you a story, or write you an essay, or a DALL-E that can take your text and make an image out of it. So that deep learning, these neural networks are kind of like the state of the art in machine learning, in terms of getting the closest to this ideal of being able to give computers the ability to do things that we previously thought only humans could do.
Wow, wow. This is it's these are really big concepts, and it's really fascinating to see that the machines are able to make decisions because, like, I don't know, I've been having so many conversations with folks about this, and I know that the program that I manage at work, one of our founders actually has a tech company, and she was saying that she is about to launch an AI product that's going to help people with like communications and things, and you know her and her business partner were saying that it's almost like you're entering into a new era where science fiction is actually reality. And the scary thing is, like, oh, are the machines able to make decisions? And once they're able to make decisions, isn't that when it gets scary? And so it's just kind of like, this is what people are talking about and making it like so that it's, oh wow, okay, well, what are the limits, what are the parameters, how far can it go, and how far has it evolved in just a over 10-year span. They've been able to just do so much. I know that in the very beginning it was really more of a task of making them understand, as you said, like, is it a yellow balloon, identify yellow balloon, not yellow balloon, and identify, red balloon. And so, like, it can look at images and tell you what is not. And so then you teach it to go steps behind, I mean, beyond that, with like massive data sets. And I don't know, it's just really, really, and when you talk about these massive data sets, it actually, I have another question that I'm going to jump into, but I do want to stick to some of our scripted ones. And so I'm going to just, really quickly, how do you see AI and, this technology, particularly with ChatGPT has grown really quickly. Everybody talks about how it took, Facebook so long to get to a million users, and it took, Instagram, Pinterest, and all of these other new things that were concepts that were virtually unheard of in the past, they got to like a million users, what was then considered relatively quickly, but then ChatGPT got to a million users within like 5 days. It really makes you wonder, what's going to be the future of this industry. I mean, like, you're working in this industry already and you're using this technology, and companies recognize that, and even like Microsoft has invested billions of dollars into OpenAI. And so what does that mean for other industries? And I'm seeing all of these kind of like these business bro kind of dudes on YouTube, who are just like, make $1,000 using ChatGPT. And it's just, it's going to disrupt our industries. And then there was an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson where the interviewer was a podcaster, and he just seemed to be so concerned about this is going to replace us. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is like, oh yeah. Yeah, most technology replaces, like, you don't have you don't have old school telephone operators anymore. You don't
Yeah.
have, people who, specialize in, just kind of doing things that have become outdated. So my question is, like, how do you personally see AI impacting industries, and what industries are like, hey, they're out, they're gone, this can be automated, it's going to make your life easier?
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably some good news there, at least from my point of view, which is that we still don't have computers that interact in the world the way that humans do and make broad general decisions, right? So like, we don't have what's called an artificial general intelligence, which is this like Terminator idea, Terminator or whatever other completely, sentient AI that you want to reference. Nothing like that exists, and it's not clear quite how we get there. And so all of these tools that we have, like ChatGPT and DALL-E, that's really what they are. Is they're tools. They help automate certain parts of jobs, or they can help automate certain parts of jobs, but they aren't becoming decision makers anytime soon.
So
They aren't.
Skynet hasn't gone global yet.
No, not yet. um, and there's so it's more like kind of the difference between using Photoshop and doing photo editing by hand, right? It's like a very specialized skill set kind of got opened up to everyone, and the people who were the most productive before now are like have superpowers, right? um, I see a lot of these tools as being very similar in that I don't see any I don't see any industry completely going away. What I see is a lot of people becoming more efficient at their jobs because they have tools like this, that can make them more efficient. And what that does is it means that you need fewer people doing those jobs, right? So there might be a reduction in certain industries over time. I don't think it's going to happen super fast, but it'll certainly happen, over, decent timescales. Um, but I don't see it, completely, at least at the level that they currently are at. I don't see it completely erasing entire jobs. I think it's also kind of important to remember, like, you can tell ChatGPT, please give me an essay, and it will give you an essay that has multiple factual errors in it, right? Um, these are technical limitations, but they're important ones. So you could use ChatGPT to write an essay right now, but if you didn't go back and fact check everything and correct it, you wouldn't be getting a very good grade on that paper. And in the same way with DALL-E, you can use it to create a great starting point. But uh, if you really want fine-grained control over your art, um, you know, there's only so far you can go with DALL-E before you have to take it out and put it into Photoshop and start doing some actual edits.
Right, right. Because
Um,
then things look they do look manufactured. They look generic. And you shared a new, sort of there was like a research paper that had all of these, AI generated sounds that were, it's just all this music and things like that. And my sister Gloria actually went through each and every single last one of them, and shared
mhm,
the link with her. And then she's just like, where it just has no and then I went back and I'm just like, none of it has a soul. It feels like, oh yeah, this is something that you hear as like background in a YouTube video, but it doesn't move you. It doesn't have that feeling. And
Yeah.
I think we might be a little ways off from that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I would also say that one thing to keep in mind with these sorts of things is that technology never gets worse and it never stays where it is. It just keeps getting better. So while that's where we are right now, I hesitate to say that's where we will be 10 years from now.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of begs the question of like, how do you think the advancements will then move the way that we work and live? And, what would be the biggest challenge for the AI to overcome and I don't know, like that, this is like another side question where my question is, how's it going to change the way that we live and work? And then like, what are the challenges for AI to overcome? But it starts to make me wonder, how are we going to yeah, I'll just stick with those questions because I feel like I'm starting to get into like so many other questions. Okay, so yeah, how is it going to change the way that we live and work? And what are going to be the limitations of AI, and where is it the room for improvement? And
Yeah.
okay, no, I'm going to go ahead and ask it. And I just think that I was having a conversation and somebody's just like, I was like, oh yeah, maybe in like 5 years it'll be, much better, light years away. And then she's just like, no, it's gonna be a year. A year is gonna be, less than that. So it's gonna move super quickly.
So both of those are kind of correct. So as we see more and more impressive results, that of course drives up investment, and you get more in the way of experiments. You get more startups building new companies, that sort of stuff. And so, in that sense, we will see more of it fast. But I think in terms of the actual core technology, um, it's still a research project at the core of it, right? And so we have these GPT models that get replaced, get released once every couple of years. Um, and this GPT-3 is kind of the core of ChatGPT, and so ChatGPT is kind of gated by the ability of the underlying GPT-3, or GPT 3.5 as they call it. And it takes a while to train these truly massive models. Just a lot of trial and error. And then once you finally get, a good starting point, you do have to train it for, sometimes months or even longer. And so, like, the improvement of each of these tools will probably be on the same sort of scale of like, when does GPT-4 released? When is GPT-5 released? That sort of thing. That's what's going to start to cause, Chat GPT to get even better, in terms of like what it's able to do right now. But like we mentioned before, there are certain things that GPT, Chat GPT, before it becomes like, truly game changing, beyond what it even can do now, is it needs to be much better at citing sources. It needs to be much better at only stating correct facts, right? Not just giving out nonsense facts, which it'll do, probably like 1 in 3 times if you ask it for many facts. Maybe 30% of the time it just makes up something.
Right, right. And I'm
If
just
we
like,
can,
that's not
yeah,
quite right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
So
almost like this thing where you always have to like, let me double check.
right. Yes. And so if we can, and this is a research problem, can we get to a place where these large language models, which is the technical term used for like GPT and all these other, this family of large models, can we get to a point where they can cite reliably? They do only give reliable facts, or they give a probability with a fact, like, I'm 90% certain that this fact is correct, or I've made an inference and I'm 70% certain that this inference is correct. If we can start to see those tools, then I think it'll be even more useful, because right now it's going to be very useful, I think, in generating automated marketing. and just generating things where I guess the final structure does not need to be factually correct. So like marketing would be great. You probably wouldn't want to use this in law, right? Um, and so I think probably those are some things that would be necessary before it kind of starts to become super useful in every field. Um, in terms of how I see this impacting us, if we stick with just ChatGPT, of course, there's also DALL-E, there's tools for video, there's tools for all sorts of things. I see it as, like I said before, I see this as a set of tools that will make everyone more productive at their jobs if the tool fits into their job, right? So like if you're a coder, um, if you are a writer, these tools can make you more productive. If you do something that's very visual, DALL-E might be useful and it might not be depending on what you do. So it's really industry specific. I think the most profound thing it does, though, is that as these continue to get better, it kind of separates like creativity from skill, right? Like if you're a really creative person and you really wanted to create art, but you never learned how to draw, well, having Stable Diffusion or DALL-E or Midjourney, um, this allows you to express your creativity in a way that you never could before. And so I don't want to call artists gatekeepers any more than like monks were gatekeepers for written work before the printing press came out, but it's a you know uh, something along those lines where skills that only set few people had access to, now many more people will have access to at least a passing ability to use those skills even if they don't do it themselves.
So it'll level the playing field. And I don't know, I've kind of been talking about this a lot, where to me it seems like it's going to free up the person from doing the monotonous thing and the, just like the things that are the everyday drudgery, and it'll allow for creativity to thrive. It'll allow for you to, have more time to just think, create, ideate, and have more of those kind of, have more time for serendipitous collisions and things that, just kind of come from, being out in nature and being around people and things that are not happening online, because, the machines are learning from, everything that exists within, online systems and, within computer data sets and, but it can't replicate something that doesn't exist, that no one told it about. And but there could be some new
Not yet.
concept.
Yeah.
Right. Like there could be a new musical style that evolves. I mean, jazz and rap and, all of these other musical styles, they kind of evolved, and, it's just like they became new. They became, these things that are, they were just organically created. So I think that more of that is going to happen because you've now been freed up from, just kind of going through, the motions in your email inbox. And, if you can automate that affiliate marketing kind of thing, that everybody's using, they're just like kind of like, oh, I'm going to write copy. And if you could replace the copy editor, I do think that that would free up that creative to put that thought process into maybe writing a fiction book, which, AI is not doing a great job of writing, fiction. I've heard, stories about people writing children's fiction using AI, but, it's not going to be the best. It's going to be pretty generic. So, yeah.
Well, that'll be one interesting thing is, so there's the training the model, but then there's a second process that these models go through, which is called fine tuning, where you basically do a much smaller training run with the specific goal of making it good at one thing. And I do wonder if, like, for instance, could you fine tune like a GPT style model to be really good at writing fantasy? Could you get it to mimic a certain genre, a certain genre's writing style? I don't know if that's true or not, but there are people working on those experiments. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. Um, I, at the current stage, none of these models, in images or in text or anything like that, they're not going to replace the best of the best. But I don't think that uh, it's not the Stephen Kings of the world that have to worry about ChatGPT. It's the people who are doing copy editing on Fiverr for $20 a gig.
I kind of want to get into oh what wait, I do have to do a shameless act of self-promotion. So I know we talked about productivity and tools. So stay tuned out there, listeners, for my upcoming video, top 10 AI tools for productivity so that you can increase your productivity. And I've been playing around with 10 of them. So I will be talking about them and my experience. So but so I know that your background in physics we talked about, and so you were studying like heavy mass ion collisions at and I
Yep.
remember from like just some of the projects, and I remember coming to rah rah and cheer you on. But so let's talk about the interplay between physics and AI, and and I also want to kind of ask like a little bit more about that path. And I know you alluded to it, but that path that kind of put you into like AI, and how it's gonna shape the future, and what your projections and predictions are for all of this, and are kind of like applying that in real world, you with a big corporation that is behind moving a lot of these conversations forward. So, yeah, what do you think the interplay is there between, physics and AI?
Well, there's a lot of it's a strained one in the sense that when physicists are designing their theories, there is this sense that the actual underlying mechanics of the universe should be simple, right? So, like, um, you could look at Newton's equations, and there's not many terms in those equations, or the individual physical laws we have, each of them is relatively concise, and in some mathematical sense relatively beautiful, in that they have lots of symmetry. There's not many terms, that sort of stuff. Machine learning doesn't really fit into that, because usually with machine learning, what you do is you take a bunch of data, you throw it into a black box, and then you just take whatever comes out. Um, that's not really conducive to finding beautiful formulas, or simple formulas that can be explained using basic physical concepts. But there are many places in physics where the application of machine learning has been useful, and has been, I would say, I don't know if I would use the term game changing, but it's certainly a series of techniques and technologies that have benefited physics a lot. So, like, one of the things that you want to do in physics is you have a huge data set and you want to identify specific events. So, like, maybe you have a huge data set from a radio telescope and you want to identify specific sorts of signals, or you want to, or in my case, let's say that you have a particle accelerator and you collect a bunch of data and you want to identify specific sorts of events. You know, um, it's possible, if you don't have a great way of doing it using more classical techniques, that you could train a machine learning algorithm to actually identify some of these events for you. And it's been done, and it has been useful. And so I would say the position that AI, at least at the time when I left in 2019, because I haven't kept up with it as much as I would like to, um, it was that machine learning was a tool that helped analyses, not so much that AI was helping to develop the fundamental theories of physics itself. It was more of like an experimental tool that was being used to aid in data analysis and data collection and that sort of thing. But it was, we even used it a little bit, like I said, and it was quite useful for us. So
All right. Well, thank you for answering all of my scripted questions, but I do have one. This just the Ernestine question. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. This is a lot of computing, lots of data sets, lots of like terabytes upon terabytes of information, and I'm wondering like what is the environmental impact of storing all of this information? I'm quite sure it's going to generate more, just energy, and you would need to have, just like mainframes upon mainframes to be able to, just kind of, and I don't know, like maybe this is me being a novice, not really fully understanding the intricacies of the mechanisms of like how all of this kind of data is stored. I would assume that, you know, the way that, ever since you have like semiconductors that get smaller and, you've got all of this information that's able to get smaller and smaller, and you got this nanotechnology, like, is it creating, less of a need to have more energy to, do these things that are very, I would assume energy consuming, and what's going to be the like environmental impact because you're now consuming more energy as opposed to like running a technology like Google might have been revolutionary because, in the days that, I grew up in, back in my day, I went to the library and got an encyclopedia
Okay,
and
boomer.
I just walked right into that one. But, but getting that encyclopedia, spending hours doing that, and then, you grow up when at the time it was like, oh, Yahoo, let me research it. And now it takes me 3 hours because then I got to comb through all of the Yahoo recommendations, and Yahoo gives me places where I can find the answers, and now Google. But, now you've got things that are literally giving you the answers. They're giving you, and so I would imagine that would take more technology, like a Google would take less technology and less storage and less energy and output than something that is so much more complex like a ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. So, right up front, training the large language models, so in this case, GPT-3, GPT 3.5, all these other ones, or training the core for, DALL-E, that sort of thing. Um, they all are very energy intensive, right? So you're using fleets of, I think for, GPT-4 is coming out, and there's a lot of speculation about it, but like, it's only going to be larger than GPT-3. It might not be super large, a ton larger, but it will be larger. And so that means fleets of thousands of GPUs and to train it. And GPUs take a lot of power. So it certainly does take a lot of power to train the model. The thing is that you can't just look at the model training. You have to look at the whole life cycle of the model, because once you've deployed it, you've usually deployed it to be more efficient at something, right? So like in our case, we're using a large model for we're trying to train a relatively large model, not on GPT-3 scale, but within an order of magnitude or so, to uh, basically speed up a specific type of calculation that's used for estimating drag over a vehicle. So, like trying to estimate, like given a specific vehicle shape, will this be more or less aerodynamic? And us training that model uses a huge amount of energy, but once that model is trained and it's deployed, then running the model once will actually be significantly more energy efficient than running the traditional simulation. And the goal, of course, is to not spend too much time training your model. The goal is to, get it into production, give it to the engineers, let them use it. And in much the same way, like, you could, training DALL-E is going to take a ton of time and a ton of energy, but once it's out there, the actual energy expenditure of running DALL-E once will actually be less than the total energy expenditure of, whatever, how much time and energy a human puts into, well, that's actually not a good example because humans are quite energy efficient, but, you know, you get the point that you
Some
only
might say that's
build
debatable.
you you get the point that the point of these models, like training, is energy intensive, but the point of it is to be more efficient on the back end, right? And so if you're only looking at training, it takes a huge amount of power, but you also have to consider what is the process replacing, and how do those things balance out. um, I will say right now, energy is definitely going up because a ton of total energy usage across the United States is almost certainly going up because you have companies like Meta building out huge new compute clusters full of these cards to do more and more training. You have Microsoft just said that they're going to be building completely new clusters for OpenAI to be using for their training. So it's definitely a certainty that the total amount of energy going into training machine learning models and deep learning models is increasing right now. The question is just like, once those are deployed and in production, does the uh, benefits, any reduction in energy usage in other places, outweigh the total cost of building and maintaining these clusters and training the model.
And you might say that, okay, you've got this new and emerging technology, and what could it then be applied to that could, really change the way in which we put energy out? Like, are we going to then use this to find ways to make electrification in households better so that houses
Yep.
are more energy efficient? Are we then going to use this technology to, just kind of find ways to, invest in more solar energy? And, so you're going to come up with better tools to help you be better at, building infrastructure where, roads are not as bad. So therefore you're not using as much fuel, or you're not burning fossil fuels. And so I just think that, there's always going to be a technology. And this is going to lead into my last question. So I know I'm going to lead you back to your day. Thank you so much, because this is supposed to be a half hour. Now it's almost like an hour. But but so, okay. Sam Altman is one of the co-founders of, OpenAI. And
Yep.
I watched a recent interview with him, and, he just really has all of these benevolent sort of, you know, intentions with this technology. And when, they first founded the company, and I know like Elon Musk was, an early investor, one involved in the beginning, and they
Yep.
really just wanted this. It's called OpenAI because they just wanted this technology to be out there for the public. They wanted people to, really be able to take part in something that really could feel like siloed, and, just something that it feels like a nebulous concept. When you first started telling me about machine learning, I'm like, that sentence doesn't even feel like a real sentence. It's like, shouldn't it be called something else, like machine learning? Like how? But then, you've got authors like Jordan Peterson, and he can be a polarizing character, but Peterson Patterson, but he said that the machines are going to be our overlords. But what do we really need to know to be the masters of these machines and to integrate them into our lives? Because, when you have people out there who learned to, operate with telephones, and to be early adapters to, utilizing the internet, or early adapters to using the VCR. Like, I love telling stories about how my dad was always that person who would just pick up like whatever the new techie gadget was. We were the first on our blocks to have a VCR, and then he was the go-to guy when you needed to learn how to program your VCR to record something. So it's like, what do we need to do? Do we need to learn Python? Do we need to, get better at, giving prompts to ChatGPT, or, just kind of learn what the best tools are out there? Or do we need to learn more computer programming? And should there be, for people like me who work in politics, should we be emphasizing that the next generation, the, Gen Zers, should they really be, doubling down on coding as opposed to, say, marketing or communications, and fields where they could potentially be in 2 to 5 years out of a job? So what do we need to do to become masters of these tools, and so that the, robots don't become our overlords?
Well, I think we're safe on the robots not becoming our overlords. Again, going back to the AGI thing, I think we
Hmm.
are the way that these things are trained now does not really give them the ability to have autonomy. The way that they're built and deployed now, they have no autonomy, right? And so
They're not
there has to be
sentient.
yes. So there will have to be there will have to be significant changes, I believe, before you get something that truly is out there making decisions with a will of its own. There's actually interesting research going towards something called multimodal models, where you don't have one model for DALL-E and one model for ChatGPT. You have a single model that's trained on video, image, text, etc., and it's able to do all of these things together. And in that case, then you have a model that can probably, you know, somewhat more convincingly be integrated into like real life, if you will, right? Because then it can view things, it can read things, it can hear things, it can see things, and it can,
It can
you know,
hear
make
things.
decisions based on those.
Wow.
That's still relatively new research. In terms of things to do right now, I would say I'm going to take a contrarian opinion to what a lot of people say, and I will say most people do not need to learn how to code. I hear a lot of people in tech saying that, you know, basically to, you know, to be literate, you have to be able to code. And I would say that's not the case, especially for models like this. These are very complicated. This isn't like, you know, on the weekend you suddenly learn how to build and deploy ChatGPT. Right? It's a hard engineering problem, and I think it's up to technologists to make these um, these tools more available, right? And so I think an interesting example of that is GPT-3 was actually out and available for a long time before ChatGPT came out. And the difference was that OpenAI just fine tuned GPT-3 a bit and made the interface much nicer. And that's when it took off, right? It's because there was a nicer user interface. The model was fine tuned a little better to be a little easier to work with. And so I think I think you don't need to be the technologist to reap the benefits of these things, right? You can use ChatGPT without being, you know, a computer science major. And you know, at this point, you know, to use ChatGPT really well means, you know, playing around with prompts until you understand what it likes and it doesn't like. I don't know if you know, this stuff is advancing extremely quickly over the last few years. I don't know if that's what it's always going to look like. I suspect it will get better and better at understanding more and more, even more natural language to the point where you can truly just put in something the way that you would say it to a friend or something, and it will produce the optimal output. Um, I guess my point with all of this is I think things are changing enough that it's not quite clear what the optimal way forward is. I think the best thing to do is to, you know, if you're interested in this sort of thing, is to stay up to date on it. You know, play with ChatGPT, play with DALL-E. You know, if you have a computer that can run it, one of the most interesting things is that there's actually a model called Stable Diffusion, which
I
is,
just found out about that one, and
you know,
there's like these prototypes out there. So I'm sorry, cut
you know,
in.
yeah, no. So Stable Diffusion is like a DALL-E or a Midjourney that you can run locally on your own computer.
Mhm.
And if you are more, you know, inclined to, you know, writing some Python or something like that, then Stable Diffusion is a wonderful place to start, because you can, if you have a computer that can run it, you can simply download the model and start playing around with it. Um, but yeah, I don't actually suspect that it will be useful for the vast majority of people to suddenly start to become programmers. I think it's much more likely that if these models do start to generate real productivity improvements, like, you know, right now ChatGPT is very interesting, and especially for like students in school, it can be very useful for them. um, and again, I think we'll see it in marketing, we'll see it in a lot of things like that, but for a much wider audience, I think it's, you know, it's going to take a while for people to figure out what it's good for. And you know, as people become more and more comfortable with what it's good at, we'll start to see more and more end user products developed around it.
Right.
And I think that's the right place for most people to interface at, is with the end products. And you know, like, of course, staying up with the news, uh, seeing what new stuff comes out, that's always going to help you stay ahead of the game, because this stuff does change pretty rapidly.
Right, right, right. And, I do think that you are just going to see people who are maybe playing around with it and then they're just like, oh, okay, that's nifty. And then, move on to the next thing or, I don't know. There's always the early adopters and then there's always the Luddites who are just kind of like, going to be like,
Yep.
all right, well, what is this going to do for me? So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for, shedding so much light onto this area of interest and yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast and you know, anything else you want to say, any closing words of wisdom as we you know, end this episode of Quick to Politic.
Oh, well, my pleasure being on here. I would just say I think some people have been saying that this is going to completely decimate entire industries, and I would push back on that a little bit. I would say it's these are very good tools and they will make people more productive, but you probably don't have to worry about entire industries going away. So some of the hyperbole can probably be safely ignored. That doesn't mean that things aren't going to change. I think that these will start to change industries, but I don't think it's going to put entire groups of people out of business. I think it'll be very interesting to see where this goes. I don't.
Mhm.
I think things have been changing so fast, especially over the last 5 years or so, ever since Google released this architecture called a transformer, which
Mhm.
is kind of like the core for a lot of these advancements. And it'll be very interesting to see where these things end up in 5 or even 10 years. And I don't even want to hazard a guess at what it's going to look like, because it's changing quite rapidly. And I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
All right. So that is our show. Thank you so much, listeners. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe for all of you viewers out there on YouTube. And that's our show. Bye.